All right, folks, we're going to talk about conflict today. And I'm going to ask this question. Have you ever had someone that's around you that you had a hard time dealing with, or more, that has wronged you in some way, or you felt wronged in some way, or even betrayed, or something like that? And there's this conflict that exists within your life. Maybe somebody is, God has something planned with that person that's rubbing you the wrong way, or maybe God's trying to teach us something. How do we deal with people that have wronged us, that we consider evil, that we consider um, involved in our lives in some way that's been a detriment or hurt us or our family? How are we supposed to deal with them? Because there's conflict. Conflict exists. I guarantee we wouldn't have to look that far if we really examined our hearts and in the thought of a name of somebody, and we'd be like, ugh, well, there's probably some sort of conflict there, maybe unresolved. In fact, if it still brings a wince, if you think about it, there's still some things that need resolved. But how does Yah really want us to deal with that? How does he tell us to deal with it? Well, you might be surprised that in Matthew 5:25, just as a reminder, it says, make friends quickly with your opponent at law. Make friends quickly. Make friends. And what does it say? Love your enemies? Huh. Easier said than done, isn't it? Well, do we actually live that out? I can think of things even as I'm speaking right now, and when I was, getting ready for this show, like, okay, am I doing what Yah's actually calling for it to be done? Because I always have said, well, I forgive, but what actions need to follow my forgiveness, or what I say? I know that Jonathan has been a great example. Even with everything done to him, he immediately says, I hold no ought to them. I want nothing bad to happen to them. I forgive them. And I was like, wow, that's something we all need to learn from, because so many things were done. But let's look and see, just examine a little bit what God says about conflict. And what does he mean when he says make friends? Because we need a lot of improvement in that area. We do. We all do, if we really were honest with ourselves, because we get conflicts inside the family. We get them outside the family. We get them in our congregation. We get them at work. We get them around us. We see the boogeyman all over the media. And yes, they are some bad guys, but I'm going to talk more with the relationships that actually touch our lives, the ones that we actually come across and that have affected us personally. And how do we act like that? How do we do what God says? Because those conflicts are there. They are there. So we need to focus in a little bit on how we think and how we act. Okay. Now let's go to somebody who may have made some bad decisions that resulted in some conflict. Let's start with Abraham. Okay. What am I talking about? Sarah and Abraham. Yes. He was to have a kid. Of course, that child was not coming along when they thought it should come along. So Sarai had her own suggestion. Hey, why don't you go sleep with my maidservant and take care of it? See, Sarah wanted to control the situation. God wasn't moving quick enough. And of course, Abraham was immediately amenable to that, saying, yeah, that sounds like a good thing. Yeah, let's do that for our family. Well, what happens? Well, there's a lot of conflict. Actually, there still is conflict. But specifically, imagine this: in their household for 13 years. For 13 years, we have Ishmael. Okay? He is there, and there's conflict between Sarah and Hagar. And can you imagine the tension in the house? It didn't just pop up at one point. There was time where they had to deal with it long enough. Well, why would it be so long of dealing with the conflict before the conflict is resolved? Well, let's look at your life for a minute, and my life. Maybe in that time, we have to be so tired. We have to get so disgusted with our own feelings, our own thoughts regarding that person and our attitude towards them, that Yah is actually able to fix it, or we're actually able to hear and do what he's called us to do. Because we have Sarah here, she reasoned that the promise to Abraham could be fulfilled just as well, no matter who arranged it. And who arranged it, who took care of it, who took the reins. And that's the wrong thing to do, because we take the reins when it comes to that person inside our home, or that person that's outside of our home that seems to rub us the wrong way, that there just seems to be batting heads constantly. We want to resolve it. We think it should happen this way. We want God to move. But maybe Yah's waiting for us to move. Okay, so let's look at Genesis 16:2. It says Abram heeded her suggestion. And God tells Adam in Genesis 3:17, he says, because you have listened to your wife. He heeded her suggestion. He listened to her wife. This should give us a pretty good clue about the moral content of Abraham's agreement in that, because he was completely involved. Sarah did what we often try to do, is control the situation. She wanted to take control of that situation and make it come out the way she thought it should come out. She wasn't willing to wait on Yah, and conflict results, problems result, because we need patience. Fortunately, we have that word in that example of Abraham and Sarah that we can live by and use as an example of what not to do, possibly, because 13 years of looking at a problem created by Sarah taking control of this situation, 13 years of daily reminders, 13 years of marital conflict, 2 women, 1 child, 1 father. Think about it. There would have been jealousy. There would have been anger. There would have been blame, defensiveness, rationalization on both sides. It wouldn't have just come from one. And yet that conflict was created by the character's own actions. It was created by his own actions. So let's go forward, because Yeshua gave us that advice when he said, hey, basically, be well-minded towards your opponent quickly. Where did I get that? Okay, well, let's break this phrase down, because it's going to really change the way we should think towards everyone we have conflict with. Because that first word, ichus, okay, that word right there has that understanding of the present. It's a present tense command. It means strength and might. And then the second word of be well-minded is isthi, and it's yanun. Okay, so it is number 2132 in your Strong's Concordance, your Greek, and it means to think well of, or well-intentioned. Okay, we're talking about an opponent. We're talking about an enemy, and we need to have strength in what we're doing, and in present tense, and be well-intentioned of them and think of them well. Really? That's what we're supposed to do? That might be hard to muster, but yes, that is. And it's more than just an action. That word describes the mental attitude of being a friend. Wait, I'm supposed to be a friend to my enemy, to my opponent? See, when Yeshua said these words, he is telling us to have this frame of mind towards someone who is exactly the opposite of a friend. So it doesn't make it easy. It's easy to love our friends. It's far easier to love an opponent, an enemy, someone who's hurt us. And then we have the next word in Greek, and it is antidikos. And that word is for someone who is against justice, at least from our perspective. They're against doing what's right. Wow, this is just getting harder and harder, isn't it? So this is someone who opposes us, who stands against us, even against what we think is right. So we're supposed to, with our strength and our might, think well of, to have a mental attitude of being a friend to someone who is against us, who thinks differently than we think. Well, that's what when you break down this phrase, that's what it means, and that's what it says. So maybe we should heed this advice, but let's go forward, because it's going to make it even more clear. The next word is tahu, and it means swiftly, with haste, right away, speedily. What? You mean I can't meditate on what they did and how it affects me and how hurt I am and all these emotions? I can't just sit here and dwell on it. I have to immediately think good of them as if a friend, to think well of them, even if they've done me wrong? Yes, that's what the word is saying here. It means don't debate the issue. Don't rationalize or justify why you feel the way you feel and you have the right to do it. No, think well of them as a friend with strength, even though they oppose you right now. Oh, how can I possibly have a mindset of friendship to someone who's in conflict with me? Well, Yeshua was not asking us to behave as if the person were a friend. That's external compliance. That action would say, well, I'll pretend this person's a friend so that I can still get what I want without creating conflict. No. It's talking about how you think towards this person. So it's something inside you has to shift and to change. Yeshua is talking about motive. I want you to remember, Yeshua washed the feet of Judas, though he knew in a short period of time, he was going to lead that way to the most horrible road to death that we could ever imagine. And he washed his feet. Do you think he did what he's preaching? Absolutely. He thought of them well as a friend. Wow. And we're supposed to do what Yeshua did? We're supposed to think and do what he's done? Yes. So I must make my enemy, the person I'm in conflict, a friend in thought and in deed. Friends get along. They care for each other. They support each other. They stick together. Disagreement between friends doesn't make you opponents, but it can bring repentance. Sure, we don't ever want to lose a friend over something we said or did. And by the way, if you're feeling that way, you also need to give the other party grace, because in all probability, the enemy's in there creating division because they didn't say or do what you actually heard. But that's a whole nother thing that we've talked about and we'll talk about again. Yeshua reminds us that once someone is our friend, that we're going to have every reason to resolve that potential conflict, because that friendship is more important than our own desire to control or to win. His insight is deeper still, because as long as we want justice, as long as we want it done our way, as long as we want to be in control, we're going to have conflict. Yeshua reminds us to grasp that significance of making our enemies into our friends. To not call them slaves, to call them friends, to not enslave them in our mind. We can't do that. We've got to act quickly and do what he does. And that means forgiveness. That means making our enemy our friend in thought and in deed, because that conflict is simply a reminder that the real issue is within you. It's within me. So Yah invites us to get aligned with his purposes, not to align with the plans of the enemy to steal, kill, and destroy, to eat us up inside. He promises that if we change our mindset to his mindset, that the world's going to be a different place around us, and our perspective and our attitude and how we face things will be different. And we free Yah up to move and do what he is called to do in that person's life. All right. Come back in, Mark. Muted.
Well, yeah, okay, might be better than I am. No, I've been both places. I've let conflict go on, and I've resolved it right away. You know, it's always, there's just no comparison to it. Anytime you let conflict go and go and go, it builds and builds and builds, and you find other things to be in conflict about, and it just doesn't work well. I'm going through a situation right now with Lamb and a producer, which has been a problem for a while. Yes, a problem, not a problem, but I let it go. And usually I resolve it pretty quick, but it just keeps coming back. And it's a problem, and it just keeps coming back, and the problem just keeps coming back. And so what I've learned is that, you can, you can resolve a problem um, quickly, and you can resolve the problem quickly doesn't necessarily mean the other part of the conflict is resolved quickly. It really has to do with more of your frame of mind and going. But since and I would almost venture to say most of the time, you can resolve a conflict quickly, and most of the time, the other side of the conflict is not necessarily resolved, which means that it will continue to come back and continue to come back and continue to come back. It may not be the same issue, it may
True.
be a different issue, but it's the same person with similar issues. And so the best way I found, and I'm still learning. All of us are still learning in all of this, and I think, may I say that, in fact, we learn with every conflict that we go through. We have to, and if you don't, then it's on you, because you should be learning and progressing based on every conflict you go through. But I'm learning that if you resolve the conflict and then the other side of the conflict comes back and you solve that conflict, whether it's resolved or not, you can solve a conflict by compromising. Lots of times you can compromise, you can try to solve a situation. Then the best thing to do is to completely part ways.
Exactly. Yes.
Completely part ways. And I think, that's what Yeshua was talking about when you have a conflict and that doesn't get resolved, then you could bring others into to try to resolve it. But if that doesn't work, then you dissolve the relationship altogether.
Right.
Most of the time with me, it's just a one-on-one conflict. It doesn't involve like a congregation. It has. I'm 68 years old. I've been through congregational issues many times in the past where it involved several people, and that's an hour and a half show in itself. But it really comes down to it's too bad. But another thing too, that it seems as though, first of all, we've all heard there's two sides to every story, and I would more venture to say there's two perspectives from every conflict. There's two perspectives, and your perspective might be resolved, but the perspective of the other person did not see your conflict from your point of view, from your perspective. So if you present it from your perspective and you're making everything right and everything good, they're still seeing it from their perspective, which means that perspective is different, and it's not going to be resolved.
It's true.
So they have to. It's almost as though there's two sides to every story. There's two perspectives from every story, from every conflict. We're talking about conflicts. If you resolve your perspective, then it's the other person needs to resolve that perspective also, in a good timing, not to let it go, but to see it. And this is one thing, is to be able to present it from a perspective point of view. So if you're in a conflict, you don't want to argue and fight about what the problem is. the best thing to do is to have both sides present their perspective about the one issue. Because I have found many times that if I can just see it from their perspective, now I understand why there's a conflict. See? Because in fact, most of the facts are perceived a certain way. A fact is a fact. If something happened, it's a fact. It's not how I looked at it or how you looked at it. This is what happened. It's like in court, you have to present facts and prove those facts. Facts.
But don't you ever find though that when someone's deceived on the other side, because that the facts are there's things that aren't even true that are spoken to.
Yeah. Oh
There,
yeah.
the facts aren't presented. There.
Yeah, exactly. So without the facts, you actually can't. Many times, you can't come to a resolution on the conflict because the facts are not there.
Right.
In other words, so that's why a lot of times it's better to bring other people in because they see it from that perspective. So,
See, I wasn't actually, and see, for me right now, what I was speaking more of is our view of it and how we deal with it, not necessarily making that issue resolved because it's
I see.
sometimes
I get it.
impossible.
I
But
get it.
if we change our heart, it literally, because if we're holding on so tight, then God can't do what he needs to do, and that could be correction. But if we change our idea, they no longer have a grip on us. And
Uh-huh.
the only person it's going to free
Uh-huh.
up, it's not going to free them up because they
Uh-huh.
still have their issue. But we stand righteously before Yah when we do what he says. And they may be screwed up. And that, as you said, parting ways is oftentimes the best thing because they bring poison into that. They can bring poison in, but you do it. I mean, you've dealt with it correctly on your side. So
Right.
yes.
Right. Well, like I say, and I am actually going through a conflict right now, and the best thing it when discussing the issue, it was obvious that neither one of us were seeing it from the same perspective. Okay. So very quickly, I just resolved it by separating it out. So now we no longer have to be together. We no longer have to work together or do anything. And that solved it.
It's two visions. When it comes to something like this ministry that you've been given or we've been given or something, because we all have a place of ministry that we've been given, and the enemy wants to destroy it. And sometimes it can be a good person, but if there's two visions, it creates division.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's in this specific
Yeah.
case, it's
Yeah.
the ministry God's put you in charge of. And if
Right.
there's two visions, it will bring destruction. There has to be one vision, and those pieces and partners fill
Yeah.
into that vision.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Exactly right. And there's just so many different scenarios of this. Just to say the word conflict. I mean, it's just that's why I say every one of your topics is not a half-hour thing, Sandy.
No, we could have
What
gone on and on
what
every one of them.
what are you thinking about when you bring these? Well, same thing with me. When I bring up a topic, it's like, sure, we'll go on for the next 42 years with it. But I'm with you. I get it. I understand where you're coming from and how all that works. Anyway, I'm with you. But I think maybe we don't want to. I think we all want to resolve issues, but I think it's rare that we want to dissolve the relationship. That's the more rare thing. To me, that means it's harder to stop the conflict by separating out.
It is. It's
That makes
painful.
it hard. Yeah.
It's painful sometimes, even though the separation's what needed, because it's painful. But if we don't do it, then it's going to be harder down the road when it's forced to happen, and it's going to create a big mess. But it's very painful to do it.
I think really people in general, you need to look at the history of this. If this is not the first conflict you've had with this person or people, then start counting them up. After 2 or 3, it's time to just move to a different area. And if it's their area and you're the outsider, then fine, go find something else somewhere else to deal with it. So that would be my my conflict resolution. I don't know. Anyway, but I see you're not even talking about resolution. You're just talking about dealing with the perspectives of it. Right? Exactly. It comes for me. But hey, we got to take care of number one. It's not our job to take care of them. There's another issue right there. Is a lot of times so many of us, like pastors, which I'm not, but you are, is that relationship means that it's hard to deal with. So anyway, I can go on. Never mind.
Oh, I could jump into something right there.
I know. I'm with you. All right. Okay. Are you good?
I'm good.
We'll be dancing in the streets, dancing at his feet, dancing in the streets of gold. We'll be dancing in the streets, dancing at his feet.
So you can't have a works-based righteousness. What makes Christianity different is that it's based totally on God's mercy. It's based totally on his grace, but the commandments are not about salvation. Never have been. The commandments are all about how a saved people live. And you weren't worthy of salvation. That's why it's called mercy. That's why it's called grace, unmerited favor, chesed. The chesed of God is the unmerited favor. God's grace is that we get what we didn't deserve. Mercy is that we don't get what we do deserve. And the commandments of God are in the Ark of the Covenant underneath the mercy seat. And then God said he was going to dwell on top of the mercy seat. Commandments, mercy, presence of God.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.